Whales are one of the most majestic creatures on this planet, and the coast of Massachusetts one of the best places to see them from. Julie Thompson spoke with Monica Pepe of the Whale and Dolphin Conservation USA to talk about the ways whales can be watched, respected, and protected.
I'm pleased to welcome today Monica Pepe, who is the policy manager in conservation and education for the Whale and Dolphin Conservation. That's a mouthful. Can you talk to me about what is this organization and how are you involved in it?
Yeah, so my name is Monica, and our organization is a nonprofit, so Whale and Dolphin Conservation. Our North American office is based right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, but we are an international nonprofit, so we have offices in different countries throughout the world. And our mission is basically in our name. Our goal is to conserve whale and dolphin populations worldwide. And primarily we do that through a couple of different lines of work that include science, policy, and outreach. So we're trying to use sound science or collect data and do research to inform our policy efforts to increase protections for whales and dolphins, and then also conduct outreach to a variety of different audiences to get engaged in the work that we're doing and support our efforts.
Excellent. How long has this organization been around?
So we have been around for over 30 years.
Okay.
We were established back in the 80s, and our office here in Plymouth has been around for a shorter time. We've been here since 2005. So relatively new, but also pretty well established here in town.
Yeah. There's a million different subjects we can talk about with whales and dolphins, but one of the things that you really wanted to stress was people's interaction with them in boats, watercraft. What do you do when you see a whale? How do you know that whales are around? So let's talk about the guidelines and the regulations that are in place right now for operating watercraft around a whale.
Yeah, it's a great topic to cover. And I first want to just mention, because not a lot of people know this, but all of the whales and dolphins and marine mammals that we have off of the coast here in Massachusetts are actually protected by federal law. So essentially what that law says is that you can't take any actions that would harass, harm, disturb, injure these marine mammals. So all of the guidelines and regulations that are in place for operating around whales and dolphins are in that context, that they are meant to actually help boaters to make sure that they're not violating that federal law that protects the animals.
Okay.
So for most of the species that we have here, there are guidelines in place. So they are just recommendations for steps that boaters and other vessel operators can take. Basically, what it comes down to is keeping a safe distance from the animals. And I should mention too, just from the start here, that these guidelines are also a really good way to keep boaters safe, because many of the animals that we have here in these waters are actually larger than a lot of the vessels that are out there. So when you put those two large things in the same area at the same time, it can be really dangerous for everybody involved. So it's in everybody's best interest to be following the guidelines. A lot of the guidelines involve keeping a safe distance. So for most species that we have here in Massachusetts waters, it's recommended to stay 100 feet or more away from these animals. So we have humpback whales that a lot of times are the subject of whale watchers because they are pretty fun to watch. They're pretty easy to spot as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I think. But it is important to keep that distance. They are still wild animals. They can be very unpredictable. So maintaining that distance of about 100 feet is the baseline recommendation there. You also want to make sure that your operations are not altering the animal's path. So trying not to approach the whales head on if you're trying to watch the whales. You don't want to cut off their path, because then that causes them to alter their behavior, and then that actually becomes illegal under those protections that I just mentioned. The one additional thing on top of this, though, there are increased protections for the North Atlantic right whale, which is a critically endangered species. And I'm talking to you right now in mid-April, we've had almost half of the population of North Atlantic right whales in Cape Cod Bay already this year. So our coast is a very important area for them. So we want to make sure that people are also aware, first of all, that they're here.
Right.
And second of all, that for this species, there's actually a federal regulation in place for operating around whales. So it is required, it's enforceable that boaters have to stay 500 yards away from North Atlantic right whales. And also right now, there's a 10-knot speed restriction for any vessels in Cape Cod Bay as well. So slowing down speed, keeping a safe distance, all of these things, if followed closely enough, will lead to fewer risks of collisions between boats and whales.
Now, you said you shouldn't go over 10 knots and you need to stay certain distances away from them. How do you know that they're there? I mean, what are the signs that there's a whale nearby or there's whales nearby?
Great question. And that is part of the problem, is that the whales don't always make it easy to know when they're there. Whales are mammals, so they are air breathers. They have to come up to the surface to take a breath of air at some point. That being said, they can also hold their breath for a really long time. So this area is not too deep, but these animals are capable of holding their breath for sometimes a half hour at a time. Wow. So even if you're keeping an eye out and looking for them, you might not see them for a long time. But again, they will always come up at some point. The easiest thing to look for is actually that breath that they take. So because their lungs are so large, they're exhaling a lot at one time. And that typically for most species produces a visible exhale, which we call a blow or a spout. Yeah. If it's a really clear day, you can actually see that blow from miles away. So that's going to be the best thing to start looking for from a distance. Other signs that might indicate whales are around include the presence of a lot of birds. For some of the species, the birds are trying to feed on the same bait fish that the whales are. Mm-hmm. So if you see a lot of bird activity, that could be a sign that you have feeding whales nearby. And some of the species here also will raise their tails out of the water when they're going on a dive. So the humpback whale is known for this, and the North Atlantic right whales do this as well. So if you just kind of see a tail coming up above the surface and then disappearing.
There she blows.
Yep. Exactly.
Now, do whales often travel in is it pods? They're not singular swimmers. They are with other whales, correct?
It's both, actually. They are known to form larger groups. Usually that happens for a short amount of time. So it is actually pretty common to see whales individually, one-on-one. So you might just see one whale, but a lot of times there are at least other whales in an area. So while they might not be really close together, it's a pretty good chance that if you're seeing one whale, there's probably others that are within a couple of miles away.
Right. And is there any place you can go, like online, to be notified that, hey, we know there's a bunch of right whales here, or there was a spotting here, so that if people want to plan a day out to go actually see them, they can know that they're in the area?
It's a great question. And the only whales that are tracked that closely are the North Atlantic right whales. There are a lot of research efforts trying to monitor the population and figure out where they're going. I will say, from a vessel, trying to watch right whales from 500 yards away can be tough, because it really is a long distance. It's basically 5 football fields long. Yeah. So you can't see much. Your best odds for trying to watch right whales is actually from shore. And that is definitely possible this time of year along the coast of Manomet. I know a lot of people head out to Manomet Point, out on the Cape as well. And so there is a website called whalemap.org. And on that website, you'll see, it's an interactive map, so you can adjust the settings and the time frame and everything, but you can see everywhere from Canada down to Florida where right whales have been seen within the last 2 weeks. So folks here in Massachusetts can zoom in along our coastline and take a closer look at where whales have been seen.
Okay, great. And one other thing before I ask my last 2 questions was, you said that you want to keep a distance between your watercraft and the whale. I know I've been on a couple whale watches where they literally come right next to the boat. So if that happens, people should do what if you're in your own watercraft?
That's one of the great things about whales, is that they will do whatever they want. And so a lot of times that means that they will come closer, which as an avid whale watcher is a great thing when it happens. But it is important to make sure that that's still being done safely. So if you're a vessel operator, you're following the guidelines, you stop 100 feet away from a whale and it comes closer to you, the best thing to do in that scenario is just to cut your engines and sit in neutral until the whale moves away again. So sometimes the whale might, like you were motioning, just dive under your boat and come up on the other side and continue on. That's perfectly fine. Every so often, it's a really curious whale that wants to kind of check you out a little bit. It might kind of circle the boat, take a look before wandering off. So if that ever were to happen, the best thing to do is just to sit there in neutral, make sure you don't have any spinning propellers when the whale's that close, and just kind of let the whale do its thing. And then
enjoy being near it. Right.
Yeah.
Now, what is the importance of whales in the ecosystem of the oceans?
Love this question. I love talking about it. It's something that probably most people have never thought of before. So allow me to introduce you to whale poop, basically. So whales play this really important role in the ocean ecosystem by defecating. And we'll take a little bit of a walk through the ecosystem here. So there are plant-like creatures in the water called phytoplankton. And they actually are responsible for giving us more than half of the oxygen that we as humans breathe. So it's definitely important. Obviously, we have trees on land that are also contributing to that oxygen supply, but the oceans make up a larger portion of our planet. So these oceanic plants are really vital to providing that oxygen and absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. So the way that whales come into this is that when they're defecating, they are putting a lot of nutrients back out into the marine environment, which is fertilizing that phytoplankton. So, when you think about how big whales are, they're defecating quite a good amount. They're also doing this at or near the surface of the water. There's actually too much pressure at deeper depths for them to be able to go. So they're always coming up towards the surface, which is also where we're finding this phytoplankton because they need sunlight just like plants on land. So it's becoming a really productive environment for phytoplankton whenever you have whales that are releasing those nutrients. And that's actually what our area is known for. If you're ever looking through the water and it looks green, it's because of all the phytoplankton that we have here off the coast of Massachusetts. So that's the base of the entire marine food chain, and whales are the ones responsible for fertilizing it.
Wow, that's incredible. I bet 99.9% of the people don't know that. That's really interesting. Now, how can people get involved in the conservation efforts for both whales and dolphins?
There's a lot of different ways, but since we're talking about boating around whales, I will mention that a lot of times it is recreational boaters who are reporting entangled whales that they come across or injured whales that they might happen to see while they're out on the water. And this is a really important way to help researchers monitor these sometimes endangered populations. So as a boater, the best thing that you could do is to call in our local hotline for reporting these kinds of things. Again, entangled whales, that have some sort of line wrapped around them, an injured whale, if you're seeing like blood in the water, fresh injuries, those are animals that we'd want to know about. So the hotline for our area is 866-755-6622. And I would highly recommend anyone who is boating in this area to just save that hotline number in your phone before you head out on the water. If you lose cell phone reception, you can always radio the Coast Guard on channel 16. Mm-hmm. But reporting those sightings is a really easy way for boaters who are already out there seeing these animals to report that information and try to get some help over to those whales.
Excellent.
And then aside from that, I won't talk at length, but we have a lot of different ways that people can get involved in supporting the work that we do to help protect whales and dolphins. So I would just encourage everybody to check out our website at whales.org for more information on how to do that.
Absolutely. And there's so much interesting stuff on that website, especially the inflatable whale you have. I just love that. I think we did a story about that a long time ago. That's really a neat thing for kids, especially, to learn about whales. Monica, thank you so much. This is so interesting and fascinating and perfect time-wise because we're getting into that season where the boaters are going out there and the whales are around. So good luck to you. Continue your mission. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. To learn more about WDC, visit us.whales.org.
If you've enjoyed this video by the local scene, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.